I took the job at Sweetwater Ridge Fire Tower because I needed the money and because nobody else would take it. The posting had been up for 3 months when I applied. Good pay, housing included, minimal qualifications required. Just a high school diploma and the ability to work alone for weeks at a time. I had both, plus $8,000 in credit card debt and a storage unit full of my ex-wife's furniture that I couldn't afford to keep paying for. The regional supervisor, a man named Hewitt, met me at the ranger station in Boone on a Tuesday morning in late September. He was older, maybe 60, with the kind of weathered face you get from spending decades outdoors. He handed me a keys ring with 12 keys on it, each one labeled with masking tape and permanent marker. Tower door, supply shed, generator housing, backup generator, equipment locker, water tank access, radio room, south gate, north perimeter, emergency cache, vehicle shed, office. I nodded, slipping the ring into my jacket pocket. The weight of it felt heavier than it should, as if it carried the gravity of the responsibility I was about to assume. My fingers brushed against the worn metal band, my grandfather's, the one he'd worn during his 30 years with the Forest Service. He would have understood this posting, this isolation. Maybe he would have even thrived in it. You'll drive up the service road today. It's 14 miles from here to the tower base, then another half-mile on foot. The road's decent until mile 9, then it gets rough. 4-wheel drive only after that. Hewitt pulled out a laminated map and spread it across the hood of his truck. His weathered hands traced the route with practiced familiarity. Your patrol radius is 2.3 miles from the tower in every direction. You've got the fire watch, obviously, but you're also monitoring trail traffic, checking the springs, and maintaining the perimeter markers. I studied the map, noting the topographical lines that indicated steep ridges and deep valleys. The Sweetwater Ridge area was known for its challenging terrain and pristine wilderness, qualities that made it both a hiker's paradise and a firefighter's nightmare. Perimeter markers? Painted stakes. There's 148 of them in a grid. You'll check them weekly, make sure they're upright and visible. If one's down, you replace it from the supply shed and log it. He traced a finger along the map's contour lines. This whole area is old forest. Some of the trails date back to the Civilian Conservation Corps. Others are older, Cherokee hunting paths. They don't all show up on the map. I looked at the blank spaces between the marked trails, imagining what might be hidden there. The forest had always held secrets, but something about the way Hewitt spoke suggested these were more than just uncharted territories. What about those areas? Stay on marked trails during daylight. After dark, stay in the tower or within 20 yards of it. No exceptions. He folded the map and handed it to me. You'll get your briefing packet at the tower. Previous ranger left it in the office. Read it tonight, all of it. Follow what it says exactly. The drive took 90 minutes. The service road was paved for the first 8 miles, then turned to graded gravel, then to rutted dirt that bounced my pickup over exposed roots and limestone shelves. I passed the rusted shell of an old fire truck at mile 11, its red paint faded to pink in places, vines creeping through its engine compartment. At mile 13, I reached a steel gate with a keypad. Hewitt had written the code on the back of the map, 7429. The gate swung inward and I drove through into a clearing where the road ended. The tower stood at the clearing's far edge, a steel framework rising 60 feet above the ridge, with a small cabin at the top and another, larger cabin at its base. I parked next to a green Forest Service Bronco that looked like it hadn't moved in months, its tires sinking slightly into the ground, a layer of pollen coating its windshield. The base cabin was unlocked. Inside was a single room with a desk, a filing cabinet, a propane heater, and a cot. A canvas duffel sat on the desk with a note taped to it. spare batteries, flares, first aid. Check inventory weekly. I set the duffel aside and found the briefing packet underneath, a 3-ring binder with a laminated cover that read Sweetwater Ridge Station 7, Operational Guidelines. I opened it. The first page was a duty roster and contact information. Emergency services, Forest Service dispatch, Hewitt's direct line, and a radio channel list. Channel 4 for routine check-ins at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Channel 6 for emergencies only. The second page was titled Daily Procedures. Standard stuff, weather readings, fire watch sweeps, equipment checks, log everything, maintain radio contact, report anomalies immediately. The third page was titled Site-Specific Protocols. I read it twice slowly. There were 17 rules, numbered and formatted in the same typewriter font as the rest of the document. Some made sense, others didn't. I pulled out my phone to take a photo of the page, but there was no signal. I'd been warned about that. The whole ridge was a dead zone. I read the list a third time, then closed the binder and carried it up the tower stairs. The climb was 4 flights, each flight 13 steps, each step's riser exactly 7 inches. I counted. The cabin at the top was octagonal, maybe 12 feet across, with windows on all 8 sides and a catwalk circling the exterior. Inside was a bed, a small galley kitchen, a desk with a radio setup, and a bookshelf stocked with forestry manuals and paperback novels. I set the binder on the desk and looked out the southern window. The view stretched for miles, ridge after ridge of dark green forest fading to blue haze at the horizon. No roads, no houses, no power lines, just trees and the faint silver thread of a creek far below. I opened the binder again and copied the 17 rules into a pocket notebook, word for word. 1. Perform fire watch sweeps at dawn, noon, and dusk. Use binoculars. Scan each direction for 60 seconds. Log any smoke, regardless of size or distance. 2. Check in via radio at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. daily on Channel 4. State your designation. Station 7, all clear. If anything is not clear, state only the nature of the issue, not your interpretation. 3. Between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., remain inside the tower cabin. Lock the hatch. Do not go outside for any reason, even if you hear voices, equipment malfunction, or animal distress. 4. If you see a hiker on the trails after dusk, do not acknowledge them. Do not use the radio to report them. Log the sighting with time and location, but take no other action. 5. Do not approach any animal that appears injured or disoriented. Observe from a distance and log. Do not offer assistance. 6. If you encounter a second ranger or maintenance worker, verify their identification before engaging. Check their jacket patch for the correct emblem, a green oak leaf inside a gold circle. If the emblem is a gold leaf inside a green circle, do not speak to them. Return to the tower immediately and lock the hatch. 7. The supply shed contains rations for 45 days, medical supplies, and repair materials. Inventory every Sunday at noon. If the count is off by more than 3 items, do not attempt to correct it. Log the discrepancy and continue. 8. If you find a trail marker or perimeter stake moved from its position, do not move it back. Mark its new location on your map and replace it with a new stake from the supply shed. Leave the displaced stake where you found it. 9. Do not answer the radio if it activates outside of scheduled check-in times, even if the voice uses your name or claims to be Hewitt. Listen, log the message, but do not respond. 10. The northern trail beyond marker 83 is closed. If you see footprints or other signs of passage beyond this point, log them, but do not investigate. Do not cross marker 83. 11. If you observe a fire that appears to move against the wind, do not report it as a wildfire. Log it as a weather anomaly and monitor. Do not approach. 12. Between 2:10 a.m. and 2:20 a.m., cover the northwest window with the provided blackout shade. At 2:20 a.m., remove the shade and secure it. Do not look through this window during the covered period, even if you hear impacts on the glass. 13. If you find mail, packages, or other items left at the tower base that you did not request, do not bring them inside. Move them to the burn barrel and log the incident. 14. The emergency cache is located 40 yards south-southwest of the tower, marked by a red stake. It contains a satellite phone, 3 flares, and rations for 7 days. Check it monthly. Do not open it unless you have been out of radio contact for more than 72 hours. 15. If you see a child alone on the trails, do not approach. Children are not permitted in this area. Log the sighting with exact time and location, then return to the tower and lock the hatch. Report via Channel 6 immediately. 16. Do not enter the old ranger station at the north perimeter. The door is marked with yellow tape. If the tape is removed or the door is open, log it and report via Channel 6. Do not investigate. 17. If you observe any person or animal moving backward while maintaining forward eye contact, immediately cease observation and return to the tower. Lock the hatch and remain inside until the next scheduled check-in. I closed the notebook and leaned back in the chair, the metal creaking in protest. The rules were bizarre, specific in ways that suggested experience rather than theory. Someone had learned these lessons the hard way. The previous ranger, what was his name? I checked the duty roster. Miller, Jacob Miller. There was no forwarding address, just a termination date 3 weeks ago. No reason given for his departure. I spent the rest of the afternoon familiarizing myself with the equipment. The radio system was top of the line, with multiple channels and a backup power source. The binoculars were military grade, with a rangefinder built in. The fire detection system was automated but required manual verification. At 7 p.m., I prepared for my first check-in. The radio crackled to life when I turned it on, the sound filling the small cabin. I tuned to Channel 4 and waited. At exactly 8 p.m., I pressed the transmit button. Station 7, all clear. Static hissed in response, then a voice I didn't recognize came through. Acknowledged, Station 7, signing off. I logged the communication, noting the unfamiliar voice. Hewitt had said he would be my primary contact. The sun set at 8:23 p.m., painting the western sky in shades of orange and purple. I performed my dusk fire watch, scanning each direction for exactly 60 seconds as instructed. Nothing but the vast, unbroken forest. At 9:45 p.m., I locked the hatch as required by Rule 3. The sound of the bolt sliding home echoed in the small space. I was sealed in, 60 feet above the ground, alone in the wilderness. The night passed uneventfully. I slept fitfully, waking at every creak of the tower, every rustle of wind against the windows. The next morning began my routine. Dawn fire watch at 5:45 a.m., equipment check, weather readings. At 7:30 a.m., I made my first patrol of the perimeter markers. The forest was waking up around me, birdsong filling the air, dew glistening on spiderwebs. The first 12 markers were exactly where they should be, standing bright against the green undergrowth. Marker 13 was down, lying in the ferns about 10 feet from its designated position. Following Rule 8, I marked its new location on my map, replaced it with a fresh stake from the supply shed, and left the displaced one where it lay. I continued my patrol, finding 3 more displaced markers in similar conditions. Each time I followed the protocol precisely, though I couldn't help wondering what might cause them to move. Animals, weather, something else. At marker 47, I found something else. Footprints, human by the look of them, leading north, away from the trail. They were fresh, made sometime after the last rain 2 days ago. They weren't supposed to be here. This area was closed to the public. I followed Rule 10, logging the footprints but not investigating. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as I completed my patrol and returned to the tower. That evening, as I prepared for my 8 p.m. check-in, the radio crackled to life at 7:52 p.m. I froze, my hand hovering over the transmit button. Rule 9 was clear. Do not answer the radio if it activates outside of scheduled check-in times. A voice came through, distorted by static but recognizable. Miller, Jacob, you there? Come in, Station 7. It wasn't my name they were calling, but the previous rangers. I reached for my logbook, pen poised, but didn't respond. Miller, I know you're there. We need to talk about what you saw, about the markers, about the fire that moves against the wind. My blood ran cold. How did they know about the displaced markers and what fire? Miller, if you don't respond, we'll have to come up there. Don't make us do that. The radio went silent. I logged the transmission, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote. At 8 p.m. precisely, I made my scheduled check-in. Station 7, all clear. Acknowledged, replied the same unfamiliar voice from the previous night. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the tower, every rustle of wind sounded like an approach. I kept checking the lock on the hatch, though I knew it was secure. At 2:10 a.m., I remembered Rule 12. I retrieved the blackout shade from the drawer where it had been placed and covered the northwest window. The heavy material blocked out all light, plunging that corner of the cabin into darkness. At 2:14 a.m., I heard it, soft impacts against the glass, like pebbles being thrown. Rule 12 was explicit. Do not look through this window during the covered period, even if you hear impacts on the glass. I sat rigid in my chair, facing away from the window, counting the seconds until 2:20 a.m. The impacts continued, growing slightly louder, then stopped abruptly at 2:19 a.m. At 2:20 a.m. exactly, I removed the shade and secured it. The window was unmarked, no cracks, no scratches. Whatever had hit it hadn't left any evidence. The next morning, I found a package at the base of the tower. It was a small brown box wrapped in twine with no address or postage. Rule 13 was clear. If you find mail, packages, or other items left at the tower base that you did not request, do not bring them inside. Move them to the burn barrel and log the incident. I carried the box to the burn barrel behind the base cabin. It was light, almost weightless. As I placed it in the barrel, I noticed it was slightly warm to the touch. I hesitated, curiosity warring with protocol, then remembered the specific nature of these rules. I doused the barrel with fuel and set it alight, watching as the box caught quickly, burning with an unnatural blue-green flame that dissipated within minutes. That afternoon, as I continued my perimeter check, I found marker 83. The northern trail beyond it was overgrown but passable. Fresh footprints, different from the ones I'd seen before, led into the closed area. I logged them as required, then noticed something else. A small piece of yellow tape, identical to what should be marking the old ranger station mentioned in Rule 16, caught on a bush near the trail. The station itself was supposed to be another half-mile north, well beyond my patrol radius. That evening, the radio remained silent during the unscheduled time. My 8 p.m. check-in was met with the same brief acknowledgement as before. On my third day, I encountered my first hiker. It was mid-afternoon, and I was checking the springs along the southern trail when I saw him. A man in his late 20s wearing a bright red jacket and carrying an expensive-looking backpack. He was moving quickly, almost too quickly for the terrain. "Hey there," he called out, waving. "I'm a bit turned around. Can you tell me how far to the ridge overlook?" I hesitated, then remembered my training. "You're about 2 miles from the overlook. Follow this trail to marker 57, then take the east fork. You'll see signs from there." "Thanks. I thought I'd never see another person out here." I nodded and continued on my way, but something about the encounter bothered me. The hiker had seemed too clean, too fresh for someone who'd been hiking in this wilderness, and his boots, scarcely scuffed, hardly any mud on them, That evening, as I performed my dusk fire watch, I saw him again. Through the binoculars, I could make out his red jacket moving along a trail that should have been closed. He was heading north, toward marker 83. I checked my watch. 7:48 p.m. Dusk had fallen, but there was still enough light to see. Rule 4 flashed through my mind. If you see a hiker on the trails after dusk, do not acknowledge them. Do not use the radio to report them. Log the sighting with time and location, but take no other action. I watched until he disappeared into the trees, then logged the sighting. At 10:00 p.m., I locked the hatch as usual. But tonight felt different. The silence seemed heavier, more deliberate. I found myself checking the window locks, though they had no locks to check. At 2:10 a.m., I covered the northwest window. This time, there were no impacts, just silence, which somehow felt more ominous than the sounds from the previous night. The next morning, I found a series of small, smooth stones arranged in a perfect circle around the base of the tower. They hadn't been there when I'd gone up the previous evening. I photographed them with my phone, though I had no signal to send the images anywhere, then kicked them apart before beginning my patrol. That day was Sunday, which meant inventory day according to Rule 7. I spent the morning counting supplies in the shed. Everything was as it should be until I reached the medical kit. It was missing 3 bandages and a small tube of antibiotic ointment. Not more than 3 items, but exactly 3. I logged the discrepancy and continued my count. In the afternoon, as I patrolled the eastern section of my perimeter, I heard a cry for help. It sounded like a child's voice, high and desperate. "Help me! Please, help!" My first instinct was to run toward the sound, but Rule 15 stopped me cold. If you see a child alone on the trails, do not approach. Children are not permitted in this area. Log the sighting with exact time and location, then return to the tower and lock the hatch. Report via Channel 6 immediately. I scanned the forest with my binoculars but saw nothing. The cries continued for another minute, then stopped abruptly. I logged the incident, noting the time and location, then returned to the tower and locked the hatch, even though it was only 3:30 in the afternoon. I switched to Channel 6 and reported, Station 7, child in distress, eastern sector, approximately marker 62, no visual contact. The response was immediate and different from the routine acknowledgments I'd received before. Acknowledged Station 7, remain in the tower until further notice. I waited, my heart pounding. 20 minutes later, the same voice came back on the radio. All clear, Station 7. Resume normal duties. That evening, as I performed my dusk fire watch, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A deer was standing in a clearing about a half-mile away. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that it was walking backward, never breaking its forward gaze, as if it were watching something approaching from behind it. Rule 17 flashed through my mind. If you observe any person or animal moving backward while maintaining forward eye contact, immediately cease observation and return to the tower. Lock the hatch and remain inside until the next scheduled check-in. I lowered the binoculars, my hands shaking, and locked myself in the tower 3 hours early. At 8:00 p.m., my check-in was met with a longer than usual silence before the acknowledgement came. The next morning, I found a trail of the smooth stones leading from the forest edge to the tower base. I followed Rule 13 and moved them all to the burn barrel, but this time I didn't burn them immediately. Something told me to wait. That day, as I approached marker 83 from the south, I saw that the yellow tape I'd found a few days earlier was now tied to the marker itself, fluttering in the breeze. The footprints beyond the marker were fresh, made since the previous day's rain. As I stood there debating whether to log this as a displaced marker or something else, I heard a sound behind me. I turned to find a man in Forest Service uniform standing 20 feet away. He was tall, with a weathered face and gray-streaked hair. "Afternoon," he said, approaching slowly. Heard you were the new ranger. Name's Bill Peterson, regional supervisor. I eyed his jacket patch, a gold oak leaf inside a green circle. My blood ran cold as I remembered Rule 6. If you encounter a second ranger or maintenance worker, verify their identification before engaging. Check their jacket patch for the correct emblem, a green oak leaf inside a gold circle. If the emblem is a gold leaf inside a green circle, do not speak to them. Return to the tower immediately and lock the hatch. Sorry, I said, backing away slowly. I need to get back to the tower. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Now, son, no need to be unfriendly. Just here to check on you. Make sure you're settling in all right. I turned and walked away quickly, not breaking into a run until I was sure he couldn't see me. I didn't look back. When I reached the tower, I locked myself in and immediately reported the encounter on Channel 6. Station 7, unauthorized personnel at marker 83, incorrect insignia. The response was immediate. Acknowledged. Remain in the tower until further notice. For the next 6 hours, I stayed in the tower, watching through the binoculars. I saw Peterson, or whoever he was, walking the perimeter, examining the markers, occasionally looking up at the tower. He never approached closer than 100 yards. At 3 p.m., the radio came to life. All clear, Station 7, resume normal duties. That night, as I covered the northwest window at 2:10 a.m., I heard something new. Not impacts, but a voice, soft, pleading, calling my name. I recognized it as the same voice from the unscheduled transmission days earlier, the one that had been looking for Miller. I know you're in there, it said. I know you've seen the signs. Let me explain. I sat with my back to the window, counting the minutes until 2:20 a.m., trying to ignore the voice that seemed to know exactly what rules I was following. The next morning, I found a note tucked under a stone at the tower base. It was written in block letters. The previous ranger didn't follow the rules. That's why he left. I burned the note with the stones I'd collected. That afternoon, as I was checking the western perimeter, I saw smoke. It was thin, barely visible, but it was there, rising from a valley about 3 miles away. I pulled out my binoculars and focused. The fire was small, maybe an acre, but it was moving. And as I watched, I realized with a start that it was moving against the wind. Rule 11 echoed in my mind. If you observe a fire that appears to move against the wind, do not report it as a wildfire. Log it as a weather anomaly and monitor. Do not approach. I logged it as instructed, then continued to monitor the fire through the afternoon. It burned steadily but didn't spread, moving in an impossible path against the breeze until it simply winked out around dusk, leaving no smoke, no glow, just the darkening forest. That night, my 8 p.m. check-in was different. Station 7, all clear, I said as usual. Station 7, we need to discuss your reports, came the response. It was the unfamiliar voice again, but this time it was on the scheduled channel. You've had a lot of unusual activity for your first week. Just following the protocols in the briefing packet, I replied carefully. There was a pause. The previous ranger had difficulty with that. He thought he knew better than the rules. Is he okay? Another pause, longer this time. He left, suddenly, didn't follow the proper checkout procedure. That's why we're glad to have someone reliable like you. The line went dead. I logged the conversation, my unease growing. The next day, I decided to check the emergency cache mentioned in Rule 14. It was located 40 yards south-southwest of the tower, marked by a red stake. I found it easily, buried under a flat rock. Inside a waterproof container was a satellite phone, 3 flares, and rations for 7 days. Everything was as it should be. I logged the check and returned the cache to its hiding place. That afternoon, as I was patrolling near marker 27, I heard a sound that made me stop in my tracks. It was a vehicle engine coming from the direction of the old service road. But that road was gated, and only I had the code. I moved quickly but quietly to a vantage point where I could see the road without being seen. A green Forest Service Bronco, identical to the one parked at the base cabin, was approaching the gate. It stopped, and a man got out. He was wearing the correct uniform, with what appeared to be the proper insignia, though I couldn't be sure at this distance. He entered a code into the keypad, different from mine, and the gate swung open. He drove through and parked next to the other Bronco. Then he walked to the base cabin and went inside. I waited, hidden among the trees, my heart pounding. After 10 minutes, he came out and looked up at the tower, shielding his eyes against the sun. I recognized him as Bill Peterson, the man with the incorrect insignia. He didn't call out or approach the tower. Instead, he walked to the burn barrel and stirred the ashes with a stick. Then he returned to his vehicle and drove away, the gate closing behind him. I waited until I was sure he was gone, then returned to the tower and locked myself in. I reported the incident on Channel 6, noting the incorrect access code and the duplicate vehicle. "Acknowledged," came the response. "Continue monitoring." That night, I barely slept. Every sound seemed to signal an approach. Every shadow seemed to move. At 2:10 a.m., I covered the northwest window with hands that shook so badly I could barely secure the shade. The impact started at 2:13 a.m., louder this time, more insistent. And with them came the voice again, clearer than before. "Miller, I know you're in there. We found your notebook. We know what you saw. Let us in and we can explain everything." I gripped the edge of the desk, my knuckles white. I wasn't Miller, but somehow they thought I was. Or maybe they knew I wasn't and didn't care. The impacts continued until 2:19 a.m., then stopped as abruptly as they'd started. At 2:20 a.m., I removed the shade. The window was unmarked as before. The next morning, I found a notebook lying in the center of the clearing. It was identical to the one I carried, and as I approached cautiously, I saw that it was open to a page with my handwriting, my log entries from the past week. But there were additional entries, ones I hadn't written. Day 7. They know I'm documenting. The stones are warnings. The fire wasn't natural, neither was the deer. Day 8. Peterson came again. He's not Forest Service. None of them are. The real Forest Service doesn't know what happens here. Day 9. I'm leaving tonight, after my check-in. I can't stay here anymore. The rules don't protect you. They just delay what's coming. I stood frozen, staring at the notebook. These were Miller's entries, but how had they gotten into my notebook? And who had left this copy for me to find? I remembered the stones I'd moved to the burn barrel but hadn't burned. I ran to the barrel and looked inside. They were gone. That evening, as I prepared for my 8 p.m. check-in, the radio came to life at 7:55 p.m. It was a different voice this time, a woman's voice, calm and professional. "Station 7, this is Forest Service dispatch. We're experiencing technical difficulties with our automated system. Please disregard any unscheduled transmissions you may receive. Do not respond to any calls outside your scheduled check-ins. I repeat, do not respond to any unscheduled transmissions. Acknowledge." I hesitated, then remembered Rule 9. I didn't respond, but I logged the transmission. At 8 p.m., I made my scheduled check-in. "Station 7, all clear." "Acknowledged," replied the familiar voice. "Everything okay out there?" "Everything's fine," I said, then added, "just following the protocols." "Good, that's what we like to hear." The next day, I decided to check the old ranger station mentioned in Rule 16, even though it was beyond my patrol radius. The rule was clear. Do not enter the old ranger station at the north perimeter. The door is marked with yellow tape. If the tape is removed or the door is open, log it and report via Channel 6. Do not investigate. I hiked north beyond marker 83, following the overgrown trail. The forest grew thicker here, older, The trees were larger, the canopy denser. After about half a mile, I saw it, a small cabin, almost completely swallowed by vegetation. The door was covered with yellow tape, just as the rule described. But something was wrong. The tape was fresh, not weathered as it should have been, and as I watched from a distance, I saw movement inside the cabin, shadows moving against the dirty windows. I backed away slowly, then turned and hurried back to my patrol area. Once I was safely in the tower, I reported on Channel 6. Station 7, activity at Old Ranger Station, fresh tape on door, movement observed inside. The response was immediate. Acknowledged, Station 7. Remain in the tower until further notice. I waited for 2 hours before the all-clear came. Resume normal duties, Station 7. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't leave. That would be abandoning my post. But I couldn't continue as things were, either. I needed to understand what was happening here. I reviewed all the rules again, looking for patterns, for connections I might have missed. The rules about the window, the radio, the incorrect insignia, they all suggested an outside threat, something trying to get in. But the rules about the fire that moves against the wind, the backward-walking deer, the displaced markers, they suggested something already inside, something that didn't follow the laws of nature. The next morning, I found something new at the tower base. It was a Forest Service jacket, identical to mine except for the patch, a gold oak leaf inside a green circle. Next to it was a name tag, Miller. I burned both items, then reported the incident on Channel 6. That afternoon, as I was checking the springs along the southern trail, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a child's laughter close by, but when I scanned the forest with my binoculars, I saw nothing. "Hello?" I called out, then immediately regretted it. Rule 15 was clear. If you see a child alone on the trails, do not approach. The laughter came again, closer this time, and I saw movement between the trees. A small figure in a red shirt darting from behind one tree to another. I turned and walked back toward the tower, not running, not looking back, but logging the time and location as I went. That evening, my 8 p.m. check-in was met with an unusual response. Station 7, we're sending a replacement tomorrow morning. Expect arrival around 9 a.m. Please prepare a full report of your observations. Acknowledged, I replied, my mind racing. A replacement after only a week? And why a full report now? I spent the night compiling my logs, adding my observations and theories. I wrote about the notebook with Miller's entries, the duplicate bronco, the stones, the fire that moved against the wind. I wrote about the voice that called for Miller, the man with the incorrect insignia, the child in the red shirt. At 2:10 a.m., I covered the northwest window. This time, there were no impacts, no voices, just silence. At 8:00 a.m., I made my final check-in. Station 7, all clear. Acknowledged, came the response. Your replacement is on the way. I waited at the base of the tower, my report in hand, watching the service road. At 9:07 a.m., a green Forest Service Bronco approached the gate. The driver entered a code, different from both mine and Peterson's, and the gate swung open. The vehicle parked next to the other two Broncos, and a man in Forest Service uniform got out. He was in his late 50s, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He approached slowly, holding out his hand. "Bill Hewitt," he said. "We spoke on the phone." I shook his hand, noting the correct insignia on his jacket, a green oak leaf inside a gold circle. "Your report," he said, taking the papers I offered. He read quickly, his expression unreadable. "You've had an eventful week." "I just followed the rules," I said. He nodded slowly. "That's what we need. Someone who follows the rules." He looked up at the tower. Miller didn't. He thought some of the rules were excessive, unnecessary. "What happened to him?" Hewitt's gaze drifted to the burn barrel. "He left, suddenly. Didn't follow the proper checkout procedure." The same words I'd heard over the radio. You'll be relieved to know we've resolved the access issue, Hewitt continued. Changed all the codes. Only you and I have the new one. And Peterson? I asked. Hewitt's expression hardened slightly. He won't be bothering you anymore. He handed me an envelope. Your reassignment orders, effective immediately. I took the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. Already? You've done good work here, Hewitt said. But this post, it takes a certain kind of person, someone who can follow the rules without question, without needing to understand why. I looked up at the tower, at the small cabin 60 feet above the ground. What is this place? Really? Hewitt followed my gaze. It's a fire watch tower, like any other. He paused, with some local peculiarities. That's why the rules are so important. And the next ranger, will they know what to expect? They'll have the same briefing packet you did, the same 17 rules. Hewitt smiled faintly. Whether they follow them or not, well, that's up to them. As I drove away from Sweetwater Ridge Station 7, I looked back one last time. The tower stood against the sky, a lonely sentinel watching over the ancient forest. In the window of the cabin at the top, I thought I saw a movement, a figure looking down at my departing vehicle. But that was impossible. I was the only one there. I turned my attention back to the road, to the world beyond the ridge, leaving behind the tower and its mysteries. The ring in my pocket felt heavier than ever, a connection to the grandfather who had understood the forest's secrets, who had known that some places operate by rules that defy explanation. I would never know what really happened at Sweetwater Ridge Station 7 or what became of Miller, but I knew one thing with certainty. I had followed the rules, and that apparently had made all the difference. I set the notebook down and stared out the window. The sun was dropping toward the ridgeline, throwing long shadows across the clearing below. I could see the supply shed, the generator housing, and the outline of what might have been the old ranger station, mostly hidden by rhododendron thicket to the north. I made coffee on the 2-burner propane stove and ate a cold sandwich from my cooler. At 7:56 p.m., I turned on the radio and tuned it to Channel 4. At 8 p.m. exactly, I pressed the transmit button. Station 7, all clear. Static, then Hewitt's voice. Copy, Station 7. Weather? Clear. Temperature 51 degrees, wind calm. Copy. Next check-in 0800 tomorrow. Out. I set the radio down and looked at the 17 rules again. Some were reasonable. Fire watch procedures, inventory controls, emergency protocols. Others felt arbitrary or superstitious. Don't look through a window at a specific time. Don't answer the radio outside of scheduled check-ins. Don't approach animals or children. I wondered what had happened to the previous ranger. Hewitt hadn't mentioned them beyond saying they'd left the briefing packet. There was no name on the duty roster, just Station 7, vacant, with a line drawn through it, and my name written in pencil underneath. I decided to treat the rules as job requirements, not suggestions. I needed the paycheck, and if that meant covering a window between 2:10 and 2:20 a.m., I'd cover the window. At 9:30 p.m., I brushed my teeth, changed into sweatpants and a thermal shirt, and lay down on the narrow bed. The cabin's windows reflected my own silhouette and the faint glow of the propane heater. Beyond the glass was total darkness. No moon, no ambient light from distant towns, just the sound of wind moving through the trees below. I slept in 20-minute intervals, waking each time the tower swayed slightly in a gust or the radio hissed with static bursts. At 2:05 a.m., I got up, retrieved the blackout shade from the supply closet, a thick rectangle of rubberized canvas with grommets and hooks, and fitted it over the northwest window. It blocked the view completely, turning that section of wall into a matte black void. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched the clock on the radio, 2:08, 2:12, 2:15. At 2:17, something tapped the glass behind the shade. 3 light taps, evenly spaced. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. Rule 12 said not to look. I focused on the clock and counted the seconds. The tapping came again, harder this time. 5 impacts in quick succession, like knuckles rapping. I stayed still. At 2:19, the tapping stopped. At 2:20, I stood, removed the shade, rolled it up, and returned it to the closet. I looked through the northwest window. The clearing below was empty. The tree line was a solid black mass against a slightly lighter sky. I logged the incident in the duty journal 0217HR's impacts on NW window during blackout period, followed protocol 12, no visual after removal. I tried to sleep again but couldn't. At 5 a.m. I gave up, made coffee, and waited for dawn. The first fire watch sweep at 6:15 a.m. showed nothing. Clear skies, no smoke, no movement on the visible trails. I ate oatmeal and read through the briefing packet again, looking for context on the rules. There was none, just the numbered list and the daily procedures. At 8 a.m., I radioed in. Station 7, all clear. Copy, Hewitt said. Any issues overnight? Negative. Quiet. Good. Continue standard procedures. Out. I spent the morning exploring the immediate area around the tower. The supply shed was stocked exactly as the inventory sheet indicated. Canned goods, batteries, propane canisters, medical supplies, tools, and replacement perimeter stakes bundled in sets of 10. The generator housing held a diesel unit with a full tank and a backup unit that looked newer. Both started on the first pull. I checked the emergency cache at 40 yards south-southwest, marked by a red stake driven into the ground near a limestone outcrop. The cache was a waterproof case buried under 8 inches of soil. Inside were the satellite phone, 3 flares, and vacuum-sealed ration packs. I resealed it and smoothed the dirt back over. By noon, I'd walked the perimeter within 20 yards of the tower, familiarizing myself with the layout. The old ranger station was visible through the trees to the north, a small wooden structure with a sagging roof and yellow caution tape across the door. I didn't approach. I performed the noon fire watch sweep at 12:02, logging it in the journal. At 12:30, I ate a lunch of crackers and canned chili, then began a patrol of the southern trail markers. The trail was well maintained, marked every 100 yards with a green blaze painted on a tree trunk. I checked markers 1 through 42, confirming their positions against the map. All were intact. I saw no hikers, no animals, no signs of recent passage beyond boot prints that could have been days or weeks old. At marker 42, the trail split. The left fork continued south toward the valley. The right fork curved east, eventually looping back north. I took the left fork and checked markers 43 through 51 before turning back. The return hike took 45 minutes. I reached the tower clearing at 3:20 p.m. and climbed to the cabin. The radio was silent. The windows showed the same unchanging view, trees and ridges and empty sky. I read one of the paperbacks on the shelf, a detective novel from the 1980s, until dusk. The evening fire watch at 6:45 p.m. revealed a thin column of smoke rising from the southwest, approximately 8 miles out. I logged it, noted the compass bearing, and reported it during the 8 p.m. check-in. Station 7, smoke sighted, bearing 220 degrees, estimated 8 miles, light column. Copy, Station 7, likely campfire. Monitor and report if it spreads. Out. I monitored until full dark. The smoke dissipated. The campfire, if that's what it was, either went out or became too faint to see. At 10 p.m., I locked the hatch and settled in for the night. The rules said to stay inside until 5 a.m. I had no intention of violating that. At 2:09 a.m., the tapping on the northwest window returned. This time it was rhythmic. 3 slow taps, a pause, 3 fast taps, a pause, 3 slow taps again. It repeated 4 times, then stopped. I had the blackout shade in place. I sat at the desk and wrote the pattern in my notebook. Slow, 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 fast, 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 slow, slow, slow. Morse code for SOS. The tapping didn't resume. At 2:20, I removed the shade and looked outside. Nothing. I logged it. 0209 ARs. Rhythmic impacts on NW window, pattern consistent with SOS. Followed protocol 12. No visual. I couldn't sleep after that. I made coffee and sat at the desk, watching the darkness outside gradually thin to gray, then to the pale blue of pre-dawn. At 5:30 a.m., I unlocked the hatch and went down to check the ground below the northwest corner of the tower. The dirt was scuffed, but there were no clear prints. I crouched and examined it closely. The scuffing formed a rough circle, maybe 6 feet in diameter, as if something had paced around the tower's base. I took 3 photographs with the Polaroid camera from the supply shed, logged the finding, and returned to the cabin. The morning check-in was routine. Hewitt didn't ask about the window. I didn't volunteer. I spent the next 3 days establishing a rhythm. Fire watch at dawn, noon, and dusk. Radio check-ins at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Daily patrols of the trail markers rotating between the southern, eastern, and western routes. Inventory of the supply shed every Sunday. Equipment checks. Propane levels. Water tank status. The tapping on the northwest window occurred every night between 2:10 and 2:19 a.m. The pattern varied, sometimes random, sometimes rhythmic, sometimes a sustained scratching sound like claws on glass. I followed protocol 12 exactly. Shade up at 2:10, shade down at 2:20, no looking, no response. On the 5th night, I heard footsteps on the catwalk outside. Slow, deliberate steps circling the cabin. I counted them. 13 steps to complete 1 circuit. A pause. 13 more. The footsteps were too heavy to be an animal, too measured to be wind-blown debris. I sat at the desk and did not look toward the windows. The rules didn't explicitly cover this scenario, but Rule 3 said to remain inside and not go out for any reason, even if you hear voices or equipment malfunction. I interpreted that to include footsteps. The circling continued for 18 minutes, then stopped abruptly at 2:28 a.m. I logged it. At dawn, I checked the catwalk. There were no prints, no scuff marks, no disturbance to the dust that had accumulated in the corners. I took photographs anyway. On the 7th day, I completed the first full inventory of the supply shed. The count was off. According to the log sheet, there should have been 36 cans of soup. I counted 33. Batteries were listed as 48 AA and 24 D. I counted 46 AA and 24 D. Rule 7 said if the count was off by more than 3 items, log the discrepancy and continue. 3 cans and 2 batteries totaled 5 items. I logged it. Day 7, inventory discrepancy. 5 items under count. Continuing per Protocol 7. That afternoon, I hiked the Eastern Trail to check markers 61 through 78. The forest here was older, the trees thicker, the undergrowth dense with rhododendron and mountain laurel. The trail narrowed to a footpath, barely visible under fallen leaves. At marker 73, I found a perimeter stake lying on the ground 15 feet from where the map indicated it should be. The stake was intact, a wooden post 4 feet long, painted orange on the top 12 inches. I marked the new location on my map, retrieved a replacement from my pack, and drove it into the correct position. I left the displaced stake where I'd found it, per Rule 8. At marker 78, the trail curved north and became steeper. I could see marker 83 ahead, 100 yards up the slope. Beyond it, the trail disappeared into shadow. I stopped at 78 and turned back. Rule 10 said the northern trail beyond marker 83 was closed. I had no reason to go further. The hike back took an hour. I reached the tower at 4:50 p.m., logged the displaced stake, and updated the map. That night, the tapping on the window was louder. At 2:14 a.m., it sounded like something was slamming against the glass with enough force to rattle the frame. I tightened my grip on the edge of the desk and watched the clock. The shade held. The glass didn't break. At 2:20, silence returned. I removed the shade and looked out. The clearing was empty, but at the far edge of the light cast by the tower's exterior lamp, I saw movement, a dark shape slipping sideways into the trees. It moved fast, low to the ground, and then it was gone. I logged it. EO2 on 4, EO2 20 HRs. Heavy impacts on NW window. Visual at EO2 220. Dark shape, low profile, rapid lateral movement into tree line. At 8 a.m. I reported. Station 7, all clear. Copy, weather? Clear, temperature 48, wind light from the north. Copy out. I wanted to ask Hewitt about the window, about the footsteps, about the displaced stake. But Rule 2 said to state only the nature of the issue, not my interpretation. And technically, I hadn't deviated from the protocols. Everything was proceeding as the rules dictated. On the 9th day, I encountered my first hiker after dusk. I was completing the evening fire watch at 6:52 p.m. when I saw a figure on the southern trail, approximately half a mile from the tower. The figure was moving uphill, walking steadily, wearing a red jacket and a backpack. The sun had set at 6:38. Full dark was still 15 minutes away, but the light was failing. By the time the figure reached the tower, it would be night. I watched through the binoculars. The hiker was male, maybe 30, with a dark beard. He moved with the efficient pace of someone experienced on trails. He didn't look up toward the tower. Rule 4 said if I saw a hiker after dusk, do not acknowledge them, do not use the radio to report them, just log the sighting. I wrote it in the journal. 1852 HRs. Hiker observed on southern trail, red jacket, male, moving north toward tower. No engagement per protocol 4. I went inside, locked the hatch, and turned off the exterior lamp. At 7:20 p.m., I heard footsteps on the tower stairs, slow, ascending footsteps, counting the flights. 1, 2, 3, 4. The footsteps stopped at the hatch. I sat at the desk and waited. The hatch was locked. The rules said not to acknowledge. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't turn on any lights. A knock, 3 firm raps on the hatch door. I counted my breaths. In for 4, out for 4. Another knock, harder. Then a voice, male, calm, slightly winded. Hey, is anyone up there? I saw the light earlier. I'm a little lost and could use some directions. I didn't answer. Hello? I know someone's in there. I saw your light. Just need a quick word. I stared at the radio and said nothing. The silence stretched. Then the footsteps descended. 1 flight, 2, 3, 4. I heard them cross the clearing, fading toward the southern trail. I waited 30 minutes, then turned on the desk lamp and logged the encounter. 1920 HRs, footsteps on tower stairs. Knock at hatch, male voice requesting assistance. No response given per protocol 4. Subject departed. At 8 p.m., I made the scheduled check-in. Station 7, all clear. Copy out. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the desk with the lamp off, watching the windows. At 2:10, I covered the northwest window. The tapping came at 2:13, lighter than the previous nights, almost tentative. At 2:20, I removed the shade. The clearing was empty, but on the southern trail, barely visible in the starlight, I saw the red jacket. The figure stood motionless, facing the tower. I didn't use the binoculars. I didn't turn on any lights. I sat in the dark and watched until the figure turned and walked back down the trail, disappearing into the trees. I logged it. On the 11th day, I found the first amendment to the rules. It was tucked into the back of the briefing binder, a single sheet of paper with the same typewriter font as the original protocols. The header read, Addendum to Site-Specific Protocols, effective immediately. There were 9 new rules. 18. If you hear music or singing from the forest, do not attempt to locate the source. Close all windows and remain inside until the sound ceases. 19. Do not use the service road between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. for any reason. If you must evacuate during these hours, use the foot trail to the southern access point, 2.1 miles from the tower. 20. If you observe lights moving through the forest at night that do not correspond to known campfires or aircraft, log them but do not investigate. Note the direction of travel and duration. 21. If the radio activates on channel 6 without your input and broadcasts only static, count the duration in seconds. If the static lasts longer than 90 seconds, evacuate to the emergency cache and wait for daylight. Do not return to the tower until you have made contact with Hewitt via satellite phone. 22. Any structure or shelter you do not recognize from the provided map is not an authorized facility. Do not enter. Do not mark it on your map. Log its location and report via Channel 6. 23. If you find clothing, equipment, or personal items on the trails that appear abandoned, do not touch them. Mark the location and report via Channel 4 during the next scheduled check-in. 24. Between midnight and 3 a.m., do not shine any light toward the northern tree line. Use minimal interior lighting only. If you must use a flashlight, direct it downward. 25. If you see your own name written or carved anywhere outside the tower, on trees, rocks, or structures, do not acknowledge it. Do not attempt to erase or cover it. Return to the tower immediately and lock the hatch. 26. If you observe any person or animal that casts no shadow in direct sunlight, cease observation and return to the tower. Lock the hatch and report via Channel 6. I read the addendum 3 times, then added the new rules to my notebook. Some were extensions of the original protocols. Don't investigate anomalies, maintain distance, report and log. Others introduced new threats I hadn't encountered yet. Music or singing, unrecognized structures, my own name written in the forest. I wondered when the addendum had been added to the binder. It wasn't dated. The paper looked newer than the original protocols, less yellowed, but that could mean anything. I decided to treat it as binding. That afternoon, I hiked the Western Trail to check markers 27 through 46. The weather was overcast, the temperature dropping into the low 40s. I wore a jacket and gloves. At marker 34, I found a blue tarp bundled around something bulky. It was just off the trail, wedged between 2 rocks. I stopped 10 feet away and observed. The tarp was weathered but intact, tied with paracord. It could have been camping gear, emergency supplies, or something else. Rule 23 said not to touch abandoned items. I marked the GPS coordinates on my map, took a photograph, and continued. At marker 41, I saw a deer. It was standing in the middle of the trail 30 yards ahead. A doe, maybe 120 pounds, with a dull brown coat. It wasn't grazing or moving. It was just standing there, facing me. I stopped and watched. The deer didn't react. Its eyes were glassy, unfocused. I remembered Rule 5. Do not approach injured or disoriented animals. I took 3 steps backward. The deer's head swiveled to track me, but its body didn't move. The motion was wrong, too smooth, too mechanical, like a turret rotating. I took 3 more steps back, keeping my eyes on the deer. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I could see its tongue, black and swollen, lolling to one side. I turned and walked back down the trail at a steady pace, not running, not looking back. When I reached marker 34, I allowed myself to glance over my shoulder. The trail behind me was empty. I logged the incident. 1407 HRs, disoriented deer at marker 41, abnormal behavior, no approach per protocol 5. Returned to tower. At 8 p.m., I reported it during the check-in. Station 7, disoriented deer at marker 41, logged per protocol 5. Copy, Hewitt said. No further action. Out. That night, I heard singing. It started at 11:32 p.m., faint and distant, coming from the northwest. A woman's voice, high and clear, singing something slow and melodic. I couldn't make out the words. I closed all the windows, per Rule 18, and sat at the desk. The singing continued for 12 minutes, then stopped. I logged it, 2332-2344 HRs. Singing from NW direction, female voice, no source identified. Windows closed per Protocol 18. At 2:10 a.m. I covered the northwest window. The tapping came at 2:11, brief and sharp like fingernails on glass. At 2:20, I removed the shade. There was a woman standing at the base of the tower. She wore a white dress and no shoes. Her hair was long and dark, hanging loose around her shoulders. She was looking up at the cabin, directly at the northwest window. I stepped back from the glass and didn't move. Rule 17 said if I observed any person moving backward while maintaining forward eye contact, I should cease observation immediately. She wasn't moving backward, but the rule's intent seemed clear. Avoid prolonged observation of certain individuals. I counted to 30, then looked again. She was gone. I logged it, 0220 HRs, female figure at tower base, white dress, observed aftershade removal, subject departed. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark and waited for dawn. At 5:30 a.m., I unlocked the hatch and went down to examine the ground near the tower's northwest corner. The dirt showed no footprints, but there was a smell, sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. I photographed the area and returned to the cabin. The morning check-in was routine. On the 14th day, I completed the second inventory. The count was off by 7 items: soup, batteries, propane canisters. I logged it and continued. That afternoon, I hiked north to check the perimeter stakes near the old ranger station. I stopped at marker 82, within sight of marker 83. Beyond 83, the trail climbed steeply into thick forest. I could see boot prints in the mud, recent and deep. Rule 10 said if I saw signs of passage beyond marker 83, log them but do not investigate. I took photographs of the boot prints and turned back. On the return hike, I found something I didn't recognize from the map. It was a small stone structure, maybe 8 feet square, with a collapsed roof and a doorway facing east. It sat 50 yards off the trail, half hidden by undergrowth. Moss covered the walls. The doorway was dark. Rule 22 said any unrecognized structure was not an authorized facility. Do not enter. Do not mark it on your map. Log its location and report via Channel 6. I stood at the trail's edge and took 3 photographs, then continued to the tower without approaching the structure. At 7:45 p.m., I radioed Hewitt on Channel 6. Station 7 to base, Channel 6. Unrecognized structure located approximately 0.6 miles north-northwest of tower, off Western Trail. Stone construction, collapsed roof, not on provided map. Logged per Protocol 22. Hewitt's response came after a 5-second delay. Copy Station 7. Do not approach. Continue standard procedures. Out. I logged the report and made dinner. Canned stew and crackers. That night, the tapping on the window was violent. It started at 2:11 and didn't stop until 2:19. The shade bulged inward with each impact, and I thought the glass would shatter. I sat on the bed with my back to the wall and waited. At 2:20, silence. I removed the shade. The window was intact, but there were cracks spider-webbing from the center, 6 radial fractures spreading outward like a star. I logged it and photographed the damage. At dawn, I inspected the window from outside. The cracks were only on the interior surface. The outer pane was undamaged. During the 8 a.m. check-in, I reported it. Station 7. Northwest window damaged, interior stress cracks occurred during Protocol 12 period. Copy. Hewitt said, is the window structurally sound? Affirmative. Outer pane intact. Monitor and report if it worsens. Out. On the 16th day, I saw the child. I was completing the noon fire watch when I spotted movement on the eastern trail, approximately 1 mile out. I used the binoculars. A child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, walking alone, blonde hair, blue jacket, jeans. The child moved slowly, looking around as if lost. Rule 15 said children were not permitted in this area. If I saw a child alone, log it, return to the tower, lock the hatch, and report immediately via Channel 6. I logged the sighting with exact time and compass bearing. 12 and 14 HRs. Child observed on Eastern Trail, bearing 095 degrees, approx 1 mile, alone, blue jacket. I climbed down from the tower, locked the hatch behind me, and went inside the base cabin. I radioed Hewitt on Channel 6. Station 7 to base, Channel 6. Child sighted on Eastern Trail, alone, 1 mile from tower. Logged per Protocol 15, awaiting instruction. Hewitt's voice was sharp. Station 7, confirm you have returned to the tower and locked the hatch. Affirmative, hatch locked. Do not leave the tower. Do not attempt to approach or assist. Monitor and report if the subject moves closer. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. Will monitor and report. Copy out. I climbed back to the cabin and watched through the binoculars. The child was walking toward the tower, moving at the same slow pace. It would take 20 minutes to cover the distance. I watched. The child didn't look up, didn't call out, just walked steadily along the trail. At 12:34 p.m., the child stopped. It was 300 yards from the tower, standing in the middle of the trail. It tilted its head back and looked directly at me. Even at this distance, I could see its face clearly through the binoculars. The features were wrong. Too smooth, too symmetrical, like a mask or a doll. The eyes were black, no whites, no pupils, just solid black. I lowered the binoculars and stepped away from the window. At 12:41, I looked again. The trail was empty. The child was gone. I logged it. 12:34 HRs. Subject stopped 300 yards from tower, made eye contact, abnormal facial features observed. 12:41 HRs. Subject no longer visible. I radioed Hewitt. Station 7 to base. Subject has departed, no longer visible on trail. Copy. Maintain lockdown until 1600 hours. Do not leave the tower for any reason. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. Out. I stayed inside until 4 p.m., then unlocked the hatch and performed a sweep of the clearing. No signs of passage, no tracks, nothing. That evening's fire watch showed 2 small campfires in the valley to the south, approximately 9 miles out. I logged them and reported during the 8 p.m. check-in. The night was quiet until 2:13 a.m. when the footsteps returned. They circled the cabin 6 times, then stopped. I heard breathing outside the northwest window, slow and ragged, like someone winded from a long climb. I sat at the desk and didn't move. The breathing continued until 2:20, then ceased. I removed the shade and looked out. The clearing was empty, but the smell was back, sweet rot, stronger than before. On the 18th day, I found my name. I was checking the southern trail markers when I saw it carved into a tree trunk at marker 47. My full name, first and last, cut deep into the bark with something sharp. The letters were precise, almost professional, like sign carving. Rule 25 said if I saw my own name written or carved anywhere, do not acknowledge it. Do not attempt to erase or cover it. Return to the tower immediately and lock the hatch. I took 1 photograph and left. Back at the tower, I locked the hatch and logged the finding. 1403 HRs. Name observed carved into tree at marker 47. No acknowledgement per Protocol 25. Return to tower. I didn't report it via radio. The rule didn't specify reporting, just logging. That night, the northwest window shattered. It happened at 2:16 a.m. during the blackout period. I heard the impact, then the cascade of glass hitting the floor. Cold air rushed into the cabin. I kept the shade in place and didn't look. At 2:20, I removed the shade. The window was gone. Just an empty frame and shards of glass scattered across the floor and desk. The outer pane had held, but the inner pane was destroyed. I logged it, then spent 30 minutes carefully sweeping up the glass and sealing the frame with duct tape and plastic sheeting from the supply shed. The repair was crude, but effective. It kept the wind out. At 8 a.m., I reported. Station 7, northwest window compromised, inner pane destroyed during Protocol 12 period. Temporary repair completed, window non-functional. Hewitt was silent for several seconds. Copy, Station 7. Can you maintain position? Affirmative. Repair is holding. Copy. Replacement window will be delivered with next supply run in 6 days. Do not leave the tower unattended. Out. 6 days. I had enough supplies for 40 days, more than enough to last. On the 20th day, I encountered the second ranger. I was hiking the western trail to replace a displaced stake when I saw him coming toward me. A man in his 50s wearing a Forest Service uniform, olive green jacket with a patch on the shoulder. He was carrying a clipboard and walking with the purposeful stride of someone on official business. I stopped and waited for him to approach. When he was 20 feet away, I looked at his jacket patch. The emblem was a gold leaf inside a green circle. Rule 6 said if the emblem was inverted, gold leaf inside green circle instead of green leaf inside gold circle, do not speak to them. Return to the tower immediately and lock the hatch. I turned and walked back down the trail without speaking. Hey, the man called. Hold up a second. I kept walking. I need to verify your ID, station protocol. I didn't respond. I maintained a steady pace, not running, just walking with purpose. Hey! His voice was sharper now. Stop! I didn't stop. I reached the tower clearing, climbed the stairs, entered the cabin, and locked the hatch. I looked out the southern window. The man was standing at the edge of the clearing, watching the tower. He stood there for 11 minutes, then turned and walked back into the trees. I logged it. 1528 HRs. Encountered second ranger on Western Trail. Incorrect emblem. Gold inside green. No engagement per Protocol 6. Subject observed tower for 11 minutes, then departed. That night I heard voices, multiple voices, overlapping, coming from the clearing below. Men and women talking in low tones I couldn't quite make out. The conversation rose and fell, punctuated by laughter. It sounded like a gathering, like people standing around a campfire. I looked out the southern window. The clearing was empty and dark. No lights, no figures, just voices rising from nothing. I closed the windows and sat at the desk. The voices continued until 3:27 a.m., then stopped abruptly. I logged it. On the 22nd day, I found the second addendum. It was tucked into the binder behind the first, another single sheet with 9 new rules. 27. If you observe a duplicate of yourself at any distance, do not approach, do not attempt communication, return to the tower, lock the hatch, and report via Channel 6 immediately. 28. If the tower's shadow does not align with the sun's position, do not leave the cabin until the alignment corrects. This may take several hours. Wait inside and monitor. 29. If you find fresh food or supplies inside the tower that you did not bring or request, do not consume them. Remove them from the cabin and dispose of them in the burn barrel. Log the incident. 30. Between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., all radios must be turned off. Do not monitor any channel during this hour. Turn radios back on at 4:01 a.m. 31. If you hear knocking in a pattern of 5, then 3, then 1, do not respond. This pattern will repeat. Count the repetitions and log them, but do not open any doors or windows. 32. If you see smoke rising from the old ranger station at any time, do not investigate. Report via Channel 6 immediately and await instruction. 33. Any aircraft you observe that makes no sound is not authorized. Do not signal it. Do not watch it for more than 10 seconds. Log the sighting and continue normal operations. 34. If you find blood on the tower stairs, catwalk, or inside the cabin, do not attempt to clean it. Mark the location, log it, and report via Channel 4 during the next scheduled check-in. 35. If you observe the stars in a configuration you do not recognize, close all shades and do not look at the sky until dawn. I added these to my notebook and continued. That afternoon, I completed the third inventory. The count was off by 12 items. I logged it. At dusk, I saw lights moving through the forest to the east. 3 pale lights, bobbing and weaving between the trees, moving south to north. They traveled for 6 minutes, then disappeared. I logged it per Rule 20, 1847 HRs. 3 lights observed moving through forest, bearing east-northeast, duration 6 minutes, no sound, logged per Protocol 20. At 3 a.m., I turned off the radio per Rule 30. The silence was absolute. I sat in the dark and listened to the wind. At 4:01, I turned the radio back on. On the 25th day, I saw the smoke. It was just after dawn, a thin gray column rising from the direction of the old ranger station. I watched through the binoculars. The smoke was steady, not thick enough for a structure fire, more like a controlled burn. Rule 32 said to report immediately via Channel 6. I made the call. Station 7 to base, Channel 6. Smoke observed from old ranger station, steady column, not a structure fire. Reporting per Protocol 32. Hewitt's response was immediate. Copy. Station 7. Do not approach. Do not investigate. Monitor from the tower only. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. Copy. Out. I watched the smoke for 40 minutes. It didn't grow or diminish, just rose steadily from the trees. Then it stopped as if someone had extinguished the source. I logged it. That night, the knocking came. It started at 11:46 p.m. 5 knocks on the hatch door. A pause. 3 knocks. A pause. 1 knock. 531. I sat at the desk and counted. The pattern repeated. 531. Again. 531. It repeated 17 times over the course of 43 minutes, then stopped. I logged it. 2346029 HRS. Knocking pattern 531, repeated 17 times, no response per Protocol 31. At 2:10 a.m., I covered the northwest window. The tapping didn't come. The blackout period passed in silence. At 2:20, I removed the shade. The makeshift plastic repair was intact. On the 27th day, the satellite phone in the emergency cache activated. I was performing the noon fire watch when I heard it. A faint electronic chirp coming from the direction of the red stake. I climbed down and hiked to the cache. The phone was ringing inside the sealed case. I didn't open the case. Rule 14 said not to open the emergency cache unless I'd been out of radio contact for more than 72 hours. I had maintained contact. The phone kept ringing. I logged it. 1217 HRs. Satellite phone in emergency cache activated, ringing. Cache not opened per Protocol 14. The phone rang for 90 seconds, then stopped. I returned to the tower. That evening, I found fresh bread on the desk. A whole loaf, still warm, wrapped in cloth. I hadn't brought it. It hadn't been there during the noon fire watch. Rule 29 said not to consume unexpected food. I carried the loaf down to the burn barrel and disposed of it, then logged the incident. At 3 a.m., I turned off the radio. At 3:12, I heard footsteps on the stairs again. They climbed slowly, reached the hatch, and stopped. No knocking this time, just silence. At 4:01, I turned the radio back on. The footsteps descended. On the 30th day, Hewitt called during a non-scheduled time. The radio crackled at 2:37 p.m., and his voice came through on Channel 4. Station 7, this is base. Radio check, respond. Rule 9 said not to answer the radio outside of scheduled check-in times, even if the voice used my name or claimed to be Hewitt. I listened and logged it, but I didn't respond. Station 7, respond. This is Hewitt. We have an urgent situation. Respond immediately. I sat at the desk and wrote down the message verbatim. Station 7, If you can hear this, we need you to evacuate. Use the southern trail to the access point. A vehicle will meet you there in 2 hours. Acknowledge." I didn't acknowledge. The transmission ended. At 8 p.m., I made the scheduled check-in. "Station 7, all clear." Hewitt responded immediately. "Copy, Station 7. Any unusual activity?" "Negative." "Copy. Next check-in 0800, out." His voice sounded exactly the same as it had at 2:37. I logged both transmissions and noted the discrepancy. On the 33rd day, I saw the silent aircraft. It was mid-afternoon, clear skies when I noticed it, a small plane flying low over the ridge to the west, maybe 2,000 feet up. I watched through the binoculars. It was a single-engine prop plane, white with blue stripes. No engine noise, complete silence. I counted to 10, then lowered the binoculars and looked away, per Rule 33. I logged it, 1440 THRs. Aircraft observed bearing west, altitude approx 2000 FT, no sound. Observation limited to 10 seconds per Protocol 33. That night, I found blood on the catwalk. I was checking the exterior at dusk when I saw it, a smear of dark red on the metal grating near the northwest corner, approximately 12 inches long. It was still wet. Rule 34 said not to clean it, just mark, log, and report during the next check-in. I took 3 photographs and marked the location with a piece of orange tape from the supply shed. At 8 p.m., I reported, "Station 7, blood located on northwest catwalk, marked and logged per Protocol 34. "Copy," Hewitt said. "Do not touch. Continue standard procedures. Out." The blood was still there at dawn. By noon, it had dried to a brown crust. On the 36th day, the supply truck arrived. I heard it coming up the service road at 10:15 a.m., a Green Forest service truck with the replacement window strapped in the bed. The driver was a young guy, maybe 25, wearing a uniform with the correct emblem. He parked in the clearing and got out. "Morning," he called up. "Got your window." I climbed down and helped him unload. The window was intact, still in its packaging. We carried it up the tower stairs together, moving carefully on the narrow flights. "Rough posting, huh?" he said as we climbed. "How long you been up here?" 5 weeks. Damn, I couldn't do it. Too quiet. Too many weird stories about this place. We reached the cabin. He set his end of the window down and looked around. Heard the last guy quit after 3 weeks, just walked off and left everything. They had to send someone to retrieve his gear. I didn't respond. We installed the window together, removing the plastic sheeting and fitting the new pane into the frame. It took 40 minutes. When we finished, he packed up his tools and headed for the stairs. Supply drop is in the truck. Standard 45-day rations plus some extras. I'll bring it up. "I'll get it," I said. "You sure it's heavy?" "I'm sure." He shrugged. "All right, well, good luck. Stay safe." He climbed down, got in his truck, and drove back down the service road. I watched until he disappeared, then hauled the supply crates up one at a time. The count was exact this time. No discrepancies. On the 40th day, I saw the thing that walked backward. I was checking the eastern perimeter stakes when I saw it. A human figure moving through the trees approximately 100 yards away. It was facing me, maintaining eye contact but walking backward. Smooth, deliberate steps, never looking where it was going, never stumbling. Rule 17 said to immediately cease observation and return to the tower. I turned and walked back without running, keeping my pace steady. When I reached the tower, I locked the hatch and logged it. 13 to 34 HERs. Human figure observed walking backward while maintaining eye contact, bearing east approx 100 yards. Observation ceased per Protocol 17. I didn't report it via radio. The rule didn't specify reporting, just logging and immediate return. That night was the longest. It started at midnight with singing from the northwest. The woman's voice, high and clear, singing the same slow melody I'd heard weeks ago. At 12:43, the voices from the clearing started. Men and women talking and laughing louder than before. At 1:17 a.m., the footsteps circled the cabin. They went around 22 times, then stopped. At 2:10, I covered the northwest window. The new glass held. At 2:14, something hit the door of the base cabin below. A heavy impact like a battering ram, then another, then another. The impacts came in a steady rhythm, 6 per minute for 8 minutes. At 2:24, they stopped. I removed the shade. The clearing was dark and empty. At 3 a.m., I turned off the radio. At 3:31, I heard whispering outside every window simultaneously. Dozens of voices, all whispering the same word over and over. I couldn't make it out. At 4:01, I turned the radio back on. The whispering stopped. At dawn, I went down to check the base cabin door. There were no marks, no damage, no sign of impact. I photographed it anyway. On the 43rd day, I completed the final inventory. The count was off by 19 items. I logged it and continued. On the 46th day, I saw the duplicate. I was returning from the southern trail at dusk when I saw myself standing at the tower's base. Same jacket, same build, same face. The duplicate was looking up at the cabin, hands in its pockets. Rule 27 said do not approach, do not attempt communication, return to the tower, lock the hatch, and report via Channel 6 immediately. I climbed the stairs without speaking, entered the cabin, locked the hatch, and radioed Hewitt. Station 7 to base, Channel 6, duplicate observed at tower base, locked in per protocol 27. Hewitt's response came after a long pause. Copy, Station 7. Maintain lockdown. Do not open the hatch for any reason. Do not respond to any communication. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. Copy out. I looked out the southern window. The duplicate was gone. I stayed locked in until 8 a.m. the next morning. On the 50th day, I found the third addendum. It was the shortest one yet. Just 3 rules. 36. If the tower begins to sway in the absence of wind, move to the center of the cabin and wait for it to stop. Do not attempt to evacuate during this event. 37. If you see yourself in the reflection of the windows when no light source should produce a reflection, do not acknowledge it. Continue normal operations. 38. After 60 days, discontinue protocols. 12, 24, and 30. The northwest window may remain uncovered, lights may be directed north, and the radio may remain on between 3 and 4 a.m. However, all other protocols remain in effect indefinitely. I read Rule 38 3 times. After 60 days, some protocols would be discontinued. I was at day 50. 10 more days. On the 55th day, the tower began to sway. It was mid-afternoon, perfectly calm weather when I felt the first movement. A slow, rolling sway like a ship on gentle swells. I moved to the center of the cabin and sat on the floor, per Rule 36. The swaying intensified. The cabin tilted 5 degrees left, then 5 degrees right, then left again. Objects slid across the desk. The radio shifted on its mount. I stayed in the center and waited. The swaying continued for 43 minutes, then gradually diminished and stopped. I logged it. 1437, 1520 HRs. Tower swaying event. No wind. Max displacement approx 5 degrees. Waited in cabin center per protocol 36. On the 58th day, I saw myself in the window reflection. It was 3 a.m. Radio off. Interior lights minimal. I was sitting at the desk when I saw my reflection in the northern window, but I was facing south. The reflection showed me standing behind myself, looking over my own shoulder. I didn't turn around. I didn't acknowledge it. I continued writing in the log per Rule 37. The reflection remained for 7 minutes, then faded. On the 60th day, I discontinued protocols 12, 24, and 30. I didn't cover the northwest window between 2:10 and 2:20 a.m. I left the interior lights on full brightness. I kept the radio monitoring Channel 4 all night. Nothing happened. The night was silent. No tapping, no footsteps, no voices. The clearing below remained empty and still. It was the quietest night I'd experienced in 2 months. On the 61st day, I began preparing the briefing packet for the next ranger. I updated the duty log, verified the inventory counts, tested all equipment, and confirmed the radio protocols. I added my own notes to the margins of the protocols, small clarifications about timing, distances, and procedures that had proven useful. On the 63rd day, Hewitt radioed during the morning check-in. Station 7, your relief will arrive in 4 days. You are authorized to begin close-out procedures. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. Beginning close-out procedures. Copy. Continue standard operations until relief arrives. Out. I spent the next 3 days cleaning the cabin, organizing supplies, and completing final patrols of all trails. I checked every marker, every stake, every piece of equipment. Everything was accounted for and documented. On the morning of day 67, I heard the supply truck coming up the service road. The new ranger was a woman in her early 30s, lean and capable looking, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She parked in the clearing and climbed out, looking up at the tower. I met her at the base and shook her hand. "Sarah Vega," she said. "Guess you're heading out." "Yeah, been a long 2 months. I bet. Quiet up here?" "Mostly." I gave her the briefing packet, the keys, and a verbal overview of the daily procedures. I didn't mention the protocols beyond telling her to read them carefully and follow them exactly. "The rules are specific," I said. "Don't deviate. Don't try to interpret them. Just follow them." She flipped through the binder. "Some of these are pretty weird." "They all have reasons. You'll see." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, thanks." I loaded my gear into my truck and took one last look at the tower. Sarah was already climbing the stairs, carrying the briefing packet. I drove down the service road, through the gate, and back to the ranger station in Boone. Hewitt was waiting. "How was it?" he asked. "Manageable. Followed the protocols." "Good. Any major incidents?" "Some anomalies, all logged, nothing that broke protocol." He nodded. "That's what we like to hear. You did well. If you want the posting again next season, let me know." I thanked him and drove home. That night, in my apartment in town, I couldn't sleep. The silence was too complete, the space too open. I kept expecting to hear tapping on the window, footsteps in the hall, voices from the street below. I got up and made coffee, sitting by the window and looking out at the city lights. Somewhere up in the mountains, Sarah was reading the protocols for the first time. She would cover the northwest window in an hour. She would hear the tapping. She would follow the rules. And 60 days from now, she would hand the baton to someone else. The forest was patient. The forest had time. I drank my coffee and waited for dawn.